Hello, my name is Coty Henry. I am 31 years old, and I gave my life fully to Jesus whenever I was 22. Whenever I was 3 years old, I was adopted by Randy and Patricia Henry. I remember standing at the foot of their stairs of their bedroom and hearing my mom pray, calling out the names of all of her children and all of her grandchildren. She made sure that I was at every youth function that you can think of. Whenever I turned 18 years old, I fell away from church like many 18-year-olds do, and I kind of started doing my own thing. I saw what my friends were doing at school, the partying, the drinking, that kind of lifestyle, and I wanted to know what that was about. And so I missed out. I lost out on a relationship with God that was available to me. I ventured off and started doing my own thing. I was hanging around people that I thought cared for me, but the only reason why they hung out with me was because of the lifestyle, the drinking, and all that. I remember always having this vision of myself. I was sitting in an old brown rocking chair, and in my vision I was about 40, 50 years old, and I just remember sitting there in this old chair smoking a cigarette, and I just remember sitting there thinking, man, I never thought that I would go this far. I never thought that my life would take me to this point. I thought back then I could stop doing it whenever I wanted to. It was just a short time in my life that I was just going to indulge and enjoy the pleasures of what this world offers. I'm not addicted to these things. That stuff I can quit whenever I want to. And there's so many times whenever I would try to stop, and I'd try to get away, but it'd keep on pulling me back in. I just would think about myself. 40, 50 years old, still trying to break these chains, sitting there smoking that cigarette. I remember an old ashtray sitting beside me, and I just think, man, I never thought that I'd keep on doing this. I faced so many dark times whenever I was out in the world, and it never failed that every time that I'd be going through something bad, my friend who never stopped going to church, he'd call me and, just to check on me, see how I was doing. I knew why he kept on calling me. It was a conversation that I truly wanted to avoid. It was uncomfortable because the lifestyle that I was chained to, I didn't want to stop doing it. And I knew that's why he was calling me. I knew that's why he was reaching out. He's wanting to help. And I remember, there's one specific time, I'll never forget this moment. I was at a party, and I was what you would call highly intoxicated. And I remember my friend, he called me, and there was no way I was going to answer that phone call right then. So I let it go to voice message, and it really, truly was a moment in my life of spiritual distress. I'd had many moments like that before, but this one, you'd say, is a little bit worse. And I remember stepping out of the party. I walked out, and I walked over to this old campfire, and I was sitting there, listening to my buddy's voice message, looking at the campfire, and it was just such a simple message. All he said in the voice message was, "Hey man, I'm just calling you. I'm just calling to check on you, make sure you're doing okay." And, that was it. And I just remember sitting there. I knew why he was calling. And I remember standing there, staring at that fire after listening to his message. And I knew that, I was in a place where I needed something that alcohol and partying was not fulfilling. Probably a few days after that, I was at work. And I remember standing there just in my despair, and I could feel the presence of God just come into that room. I had been running from God so hard. And whenever I'd feel him pull at me, I literally would try to run further away. I would try to force myself away from the Lord. And God pursued me actively. As I was at work, I felt him come into that room, and he spoke to me. He spoke to my spirit, and he just said, "I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm waiting on you. My arms are open. I know what you're going through. I'm still here." And my coworker, he's on the other side of the machine, and he couldn't see me, but just tears was just pouring down my face, because I knew that moment in my life, things were about to be different. Things were about to change. That night, I was sitting there in my cabin and contemplating God, contemplating coming back, kind of just getting my spirit, I guess, ready for change. And I called my buddy who'd called me so many times, and I was like, "Man, I think I got to go to church. I need to go to church." And he's like, it was like midnight whenever I called him, and I told him, like, "Man, I got to go to church." And he's like, "Oh man, that's awesome. That's great. We'll do it. I think church is going to be, a couple days from now. It's going to be Sunday. We'll go to church." And I was like, "Man, I think I want to go right now. Like, I need to go. I need to go to church." And he was like, "Are you sure? Like, it's midnight, right? Are you sure you want to do that?" I was like, yeah, I know you got a key. I know you got a key, so you have to get me in that building right now. He's like, "Okay, man, that's all right. We'll do that." And so we went to church, and as we were walking up to the door and approaching it, I just felt in my spirit, like, you're changing. You're that old person that used to have you bound. Those chains that used to have you bound is about to fall off of you. You're about to become a brand new, changed person. And I felt that so heavy in my spirit. And we walked in there, and I just remember crying out to God, just crying out to him, telling him everything, giving him all of my brokenness, everything that I've been dealing with. I was just being honest with him. Tears were just pouring down my face. There's just so much liquid just pouring out of my face. And I remember sitting there and just seeing hundreds of tissues just laying across the ground. And it was about a couple of days later, I came to the Pentecostals in Northwest Arkansas. And I remember I came as the Bible tells you to do. I came in sweatpants, and I had hair almost down to my shoulders. I didn't care what I looked like. I didn't. All I knew was that I needed something. I needed a spiritual healing within me. I didn't care what people thought, what I looked like. I wasn't there for anybody else. I was there so I could have a change, so I could have God just change my life and heal all of this brokenness that I had experienced. And I knew this is the place. I knew this was the place to have that. And I remember everybody during the altar call went up to the altar, and I was the last person up there. And I slowly kind of walked down and made my way down there, and I just stood there, and I looked up to my right, and I just saw a pastor just coming down off the stairs and just weaving through all these people, and my heart's beating. I don't really know what he's doing, but he's coming straight for me, and he comes over and he lays his hand on me, and he just says, "Coty, this is what you've been waiting on. This is what you've been waiting for this whole time. Don't let it pass you by. Don't let it pass up." I said, "Okay," and I lifted up my hands, and I started to just give everything to him. I began to speak in other tongues. I remember just feeling all these hands around me, and I looked around me, and I saw all these people that have always been there for me. Probably a year after all this, I gave up drinking, I gave up cigarettes, I quit doing all of that stuff. I stopped it all. I was so unbalanced emotionally. My thoughts didn't seem to go well with the situations I was in. I was honestly kind of a wreck, really, whenever I first came. And I just remember going to church functions. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just knew that God was walking with me everywhere that I went. I just knew that he was there. A big thing that kept me in church was the relationships. I didn't know this, but at the time, but the relationships whenever I was in my youth, what I built with the people that I went to church with, those guys, those youth group members that I was with, that I knew through them what love was. I didn't experience anything like that in the world. I never found any like alcohol, partying, none of that stuff filled that emptiness. And also during this time, I wanted to find a good woman. I had been in terrible relationships that broke me to pieces. I was done with that. I wanted one good woman for the rest of my life that God had planned for me. And I waited 3 years, and it was not easy. I remember praying to God one night, God, will you show me? Can you just show me who this person might be? And I could hear the Lord speak to me, will you wait for me? And I was like, yeah, Lord, I'll wait for you. You know, and I'll wait as long as you want. I'll wait for you. Could you just like tell me her name? Or like, is she somebody that might be going to church right now? Could you just tell me that? And he said the same thing again. He just said, will you wait for me? Yeah. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. I will wait for you. Amy Henry came into my life. And I just knew right off the bat that it was meant to be. And she truly is the one that God intended me to have. And I have 2 beautiful baby girls now. When I first came into church, I went to college and I became a respiratory therapist. I've been in situations where I deal with people on life support. I'm in hospice situations. I'm there during very distressful times. I'm currently going through a chaplain training program. I'm placing myself in spiritual distressful moments because I know what God has done for me, and I can't keep that to myself. I have to tell others about it. I have to give people what the Lord has given to me. I have to show people all that God has done. My wife and I are hyphen leaders now. We help students ages 18 to 30, and God has just really blessed our ministry so much. And there's so much that God has done for me, and I'm looking very much forward to what He still has in store.